Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora, and for this next hour, we will be speaking about consciousness and the trajectory of consciousness and where thoughts come from and who thinks through you. So I have just returned inside from doing some sun gazing outside, and I'd like to explain the experience from a first-hand point of view of receiving this information, because this is where I get these ideas to express to all of you, or express in concert with all of you. Because we are right now experiencing a mind concert, and that's the upshoot of all of this teaching. So I connected with the sun. The sun is like the laser that is reading the information that is on the surface of a CD or a DVD. And in this case, the CD or DVD is me, or like the sun, a ray of light going through a crystal or a prism. I am like the crystal or the prism, and this can apply to any human being. This is all of us. In fact, if you look at my paintings, especially the one entitled Ascension 2012, you will see very good evidences of how your chakras, or energy centers of your non-physical body, are the evidence of the refraction of the primary ray of unity consciousness. So, to use an analogy here, you are like a crystal, and sunlight is, unity consciousness is like sunlight, and when that light passes through you and your unique shape of your set of chakras, it is refracted or split up into its constituent elements, okay? So I have my own unique tune that I play when sunlight is applied to me. And I'm shaped like a crystal in that the information that I contain is arranged very specifically and in an orderly fashion, much like the crystals, the molecules which make up a crystal matrix. Where does that information come from? It comes from the stellar network of consciousness. So this is the galactic level neurology, and essentially sunlight is the neural impulse of a very large entity within which we reside, and wherein I would classify each one of our individuated life experiences as being the journey of a neural impulse crossing the synaptic gap. So, if I were in my studio with you right now, I would pick up a pencil and begin to draw the shape of the time vortex. If you're not familiar with what that is, click on the Birth of a New Dimension Twitter feed. That is on the UCY/FRL homepage all the way at the left, or go to @BirthDimension and you'll see some of my sketches. If you would like to paint a picture with your imagination, imagine the shape of a circus tent in cross-section, where you have this half vortex, and that there are lines, vertical lines, that are parallel, that all travel from the floor of the circus tent all the way up to the membrane of the tent itself. And only one of those lines stretches all the way up to the point of the tent and even out through a hole at the top of the tent there. And that is the path of least likelihood. I name it least not because it is less valuable than any of the other paths, least in terms of probability. So if we were to look at the entirety of the graph from a top-down perspective, it would look like a bullseye. And there are large areas where it is very probable and very likely on the periphery that consciousness or a point might land. It is extremely unlikely that consciousness will occupy that one little central, we could call it area of the target or area of the bullseye. It is the path of least likelihood, and it is the path of ascension. So I have also spoken extensively on previous broadcasts about how in the time before the human genetic code was changed and diminished and degraded, humans had a direct connection to source at all times and did not experience cellular aging and disease and did not experience death as it is currently experienced on Earth. That death is the aberration, the thing that should not exist, the thing that is a socially aberrant behavior, and that ascension is what is supposed to be happening. Ascension is what happened to everyone before the genetic code was changed. And ascension means that consciousness came from source, the zeroth dimension, the presence of everything, the infinite singularity, and traveled into the material realm where it slowed down. You and I, and anything else that you touch with your finger and feel like it is matter, is light that is going slower than the speed of light. And that is because we have interfered with light on its journey. And here in this conversation, we can have fun by interchangeably exchanging the word light for consciousness. So we can also exchange light for information. So we can say, physical matter is solidified light. Physical matter is light that has been slowed down in its journey. Physical matter is consciousness that has been interfered with, or consciousness that has been slowed down in its journey. And that consciousness, if it hadn't been interfered with by, say, a photon going into my retina and stimulating my brain, that photon would have continued endlessly in a line, just emanated outward from the star, which is its, the thinker that just sent out that thought. That thought would continue endlessly, ceaselessly, but something happened and it got interfered with. So now that thought is circulating around in the physical realm. Literally, this is the partnership between ourselves as individuals and the solar, I want to call it deity, but not have it be associated with mind control and social control and religion and mythology. I want to give the idea of a very, very large, very benevolent creature that we're all a part of that is magical, and that also it is not something that is out of reach. It is our parent, it is our origin, and also it is our destination. So the consciousness that is slowed down light is circulating here through the material realm, and that's like the periphery of the timelines that are in this quote-unquote circus tent or time vortex. And your time vortex is like a record of your life, and as you play the song of your life, you circulate towards the center. Your consciousness is refined, you make better and better choices, you become more aligned with the core values of who you really are, because who you really are emanates from the sun. And not just the sun, all of the stars. It is a stellar network. You are but a neurotransmitter in this great brain. The way that neurotransmitters work within our own tiny little organic brain. A big, long, spaghetti-shaped neuron has an end, and then there's another big, long, spaghetti-shaped neuron. And there's a little gap between them. This is the synaptic gap. An energy or thought impulse travels along the spaghetti length of the neuron, and then it reaches the end, and it has to jump across. And the way that it jumps across is by turning itself into a chemical signal. So an electrical signal becomes a chemical signal. It's shaped like a molecule, and it has to flow across this area where there is nothing, to the viewpoint of a neuron. It's like jumping across the Grand Canyon. There's nothing there, and you have to get to the other side. And this chemical process, these molecules that reach the other side, it is necessary, or these processes are responsible for thoughts and consciousness within your body. If these processes are changed or disrupted, for example, if you don't eat enough salt, you will die because the chemical reaction of impulses crossing the synaptic gap is reliant upon sodium. And same thing with calcium, same thing with potassium. We have to have these essential chemicals in balance in our body, because if we don't, the neurology goes haywire. So your individual incarnation is like the journey of one little neurotransmitter trying to make it from the end point of one neuron to the beginning point of the next neuron. And the circus tent-like diagram that I described, the time vortex, the base of the vortex where all the lines emanate from, that is birth, and that would be considered one side of the synaptic gap, and the point of exit, where the path of least likelihood exits the wormhole that is at the very, very top of the vortex. That would be analogous to the next neuron. And your entire life of coming into the physical realm, coalescing as matter, existing as consciousness, and going through all the life lessons that you go through are all about crossing the synaptic gap and making it to the other side. And you do that by aligning all of your chakras with this ascension pathway, or the path of least likelihood. Through many great travails, we do this, basically living over and over and over within one lifetime. I've likened it to the brilliant, comedic yet philosophical movie Groundhog's Day, where the main character relives one fateful Groundhog's Day over and over and over, refining his consciousness from the point of being a rather, a cad, self-centered person to being a more compassionate and loving individual. And this is what we are experiencing in each individuated lifetime. When we have completed this process of schooling, we are prepared to have the great thought that our lives are preparing us for. Each one of us will think this great thought. You'll think it as an individual, and when you think it as an individual, you're like one single musician playing a note that is part of a much larger symphonic structure. And when you think this thought or play this note, it echoes and reverberates harmonically at the same moment that all of these other beautiful notes are being thought or played. And you're part of the great brain that is this not only galaxy, but is this cosmos. And the thought is, I am God. So I have recorded a lesson all about this. It's part of Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. This is a 5-month-long course that I created, and I'm also running it as a webinar series, and that will begin as soon as my website is completed in its new redesigned format, so probably in the next month or so. Stay tuned for that. But the idea is there's a lesson called the I Am God Circuit. It's part of the advanced teaching, and this is to say that your entire life as the corporeal individual that you are right now is a recipe that has been created to bring you to the realization and the moment when you fully embody the thought, I am God. And to be clear, this is not to say that at your moment of ascension you will think Aurora is God. Clearly, Aurora is God. Each one of us is God. So each one of us at the moment of ascension thinks the thought, I am God. And when you do that, you are aligning your thoughts harmonically with the great brain, with the great thinker. And the action, so we're talking now in an abstract sense. This is not something that you would see physically happen. I am not saying that you will see a human or humanoid person physically jump through the air from a cliff to another cliff. It is not like that at all. A person who undergoes this energetic transformation and consciousness transformation can be sitting on their couch in their living room or sitting underneath a beautiful redwood tree. It is a change in the level of consciousness. If we were to look at your awareness, we would see your awareness create an unbroken pathway of consciousness between your birth and your ascension. And that would be like saying we are tying together the chemical impulse that is emanating from one neuron to the next neuron. neurons in a great brain, a brain that is so large it is difficult for people with the limited neurology of a human, as it is right now, to even conceive of a brain that size. So we're able to use things like our own neurology and the computer systems that we have built in order to understand things through the process of analogy. I can tell you, you understand your individual brain and your individual neurology and how many millions of connections are possible through your neural connectivity, and apply that to consciousness that is flowing in the cosmos. So you're part of a great brain, and I love to use the analogy of a symphony because first of all, brains function in terms of waveforms, and symphonies it's music. It is, air that is moving harmonically in the correct waveforms. And the difference between music and just noise, or our definition of it, is that music conforms to certain structures. It is not just random waves. These are waves that are highly organized. If you check out my artwork is the visualization of these structured waves. My artwork is like the visualization of music. And if you have ever looked at cymatics, this is when you look at vibrating either sand or powder or even the surface of water or some other liquid, when certain vibrations or notes are played, it makes these structured patterns. So it is understanding that really the cosmic language is a language of vibration. That vibration can be evidenced as light, waves that are moving and produce light, or waves that are sound waves, and the two of them have an interplay. Music is also a really good analogy because of the phenomenon of sympathetic vibration. This is what happens when you pluck one guitar string or violin string or whatever, and a string that is nearby but is not physically being touched vibrates sympathetically. It vibrates in accordance or in response to the initial string that has been stimulated. And quite literally, our hearts and your energy center that is your heart chakra, we are connected. We're connected on all of our chakras. We are connected because we are all emanating sounds and tones that are affecting one another in exactly the same way that I was going to say something else. Let me rewind and say this. It's like a field of pendulums. If you've ever seen this physics experiment, if you put let's say a dozen pendulums on a table and they're all going at different rates, if you allow them to simply go and express their different rates, at a certain point, they all equalize. And the reason why they all equalize is because they begin to share vibrations with one another through the table that they're standing on. So the ones that are going a little bit too fast slow down, they give up some of their energy. The ones that are going a little bit too slow gain energy from the other ones, and soon you have all of the metronomes going synchronously. This is exactly what happens with our non-physical energy. So people have been perceiving this for a very long time, but have not had impeccable language to describe it and really talk about it or even measure it. It is the idea that you can be with people who quote unquote bring you down. You can be at a party that makes you feel great. You're marinating in your environment. I'm certain that if you're a human being on the earth right now, you've probably had this experience. Some people, when you're in their presence, they make you feel worse, like you feel more agitated or more depressed, or certain groups of people might make you feel that way. Or going to certain places might make you feel that way. If I need to prompt you more, I'm going to say imagine going to Walmart or some giant big box superstore with tons of fluorescent lights and fluoride drinking people walking slowly. Now we're starting to get there, okay? Certain people or environments are like slow-moving metronomes. And if you are a fast-moving metronome and you go into one of those environments, the environment itself will begin to bring your energy down. And I'll give you a little bit of information here that the structure of those big stores, they're designed to bring your energy down so that as you become more disheveled energetically and more confused, more money leaps out of your pockets. You're like, hey, I need to buy that. I need to buy that. And you end up walking around for hours in a store buying cheap things that are made in a country produced by slave labor and not that you really need. And you're buying them from a company that doesn't produce them ethically. So in every single way, those shopping environments are created to encourage lack of consciousness. The more unconscious you are, the better it is for the company. They want unconscious consumers, people who can't think straight, people who are easy to manipulate, and in this case, manipulation is the tacit social agreement known as advertising. Ooh, now let's give an equal and opposite example. How about, have you ever had a Reiki session? These are wonderful, very old healing techniques. Reiki is just one format of non-physical, hands-on healing that has to do with connecting to an energy lineage. And in this case, it came from the Far East, I believe from Japan. And when I have had Reiki sessions, I emerged from my, energy healing session feeling wonderful, feeling renewed, feeling like I could think more clearly, like I could run a marathon, feeling like I had endless energy to make new projects and full of ideas for, projects and everything like that. And that's a pretty extreme example, having a powerful healing with a Reiki master. I can give other, smaller examples of just having a really wonderful conversation with someone, or receiving a gift from someone, or when you get a hug from someone who has no agenda and just wants to love you and give you plenty of good energy, or the type of unconditional love and energy that we receive from dogs and cats and horses. When I feel that type of energy, my energy is being uplifted. So here's the whole point of this extremely long-winded description, that we are all like these pendulums or metronomes, and we are all affecting one another's vibration. And I've described on other broadcasts how that is the justification for my own presence here in this level of reality. That it's not appropriate for someone to, it's called being a carpetbagger, like an outsider who simply waves their magic wand and imposes their ideas and their structures on, some far-off land. That's not considered appropriate. What is considered appropriate is, if you wish to be powerful in a realm, you must occupy that realm. Because we're getting into interdimensional ethics here, and part of it is, yes, it is a world of free will, and yes, each individual must be allowed to make their choices and make their mistakes and learn their life lessons by making mistakes, etc., etc. So it's not right for me to tie your hands and say you're not allowed to do such and such because you might need to do such and such in order to learn and in order for your consciousness to grow and in order to eventually reach that path of least likelihood. So we all need to allow each other our choices and our journeys. And at the same time, we are all affecting one another. We do not live sealed in a vacuum. We live in a context. That context is interactive. On the very basic biological level, you're constantly breathing in air and breathing out air, and that is a flow of energy that connects you to the world. You're connected to the plant realm. You're connected to the microbial realm. You're connected to every other person that is breathing air in and out, okay? That's just, even if you are a super objective materialist, rational skeptic, that is something that you can cling to in order to understand what I'm talking about here. And if you're willing to do yoga of the perception, you can understand that science recognizes that the brain is emanating waves. If you've ever had an EEG, electroencephalogram, it means they glue tiny electrodes to your scalp and measure a small portion of the spectrum of the waves that your brain emanates. So science recognizes that our brains emanate. Science hasn't quite made the leap to understand that that the science has not yet become sophisticated enough to recognize that the waves which our brain emanates not only are sent out, but are also received. So our mind or our brain or our system of perception is not just a transmitter, it's also a receiver. Now let's get into DNA. Not to be too literal, but I want you to understand that your DNA is also your genes, your genetic code, is also like an antenna, and that it has everything to do with the thoughts that you're thinking and what you are perceiving. So I'm now saying, who is thinking through you and who is affecting you? And I'll just finish that thought. I'm allowed to be here as a walk-in. P.S. I'm a walk-in. Because I'm not allowed to wave my magic wand from another dimension and impose my thoughts and ideas upon everyone who's in the physical realm. If I want to change the physical realm, I have to actually roll up my sleeves, come down here, get a body, and, move my body around and walk and talk and, put my hand in the air and say, hey, everyone, listen to me. I've got something to tell you about. Or I can also meditate. When I sit in my physical body and I send out thought waves, I am affecting all of the other metronomes that are keeping their tempo here on Earth. And this is really the beautiful tradition of the meditators of the Far East. So I'm talking about the Buddhist tradition and the people that cultivate their minds that are part of it goes by many different names. We're talking about a tradition of beings who meditate and consciously cultivate their mind and consciously send out waves of compassion. So when I spoke before about the phenomenon of sympathetic vibration, that is the definition of compassion between the heart chakras. When you vibrate sympathetically in your heart with another being, you are feeling compassion. So on the anthropomorphic level, what this feels like is if you witness someone else in distress, you feel a set of emotions like turmoil or the desire to help someone else to alleviate suffering because you are vibrating sympathetically with them. It's like saying we've plucked this guitar string over here. Maybe this guitar string over here is, bam, a person got in a car accident. And you are this guitar string over here. You didn't get in a car accident, so why are you feeling bad? The answer is because your heart is harmonically connected to the other person, and their life matters to you. This is basic. I am giving words to something that everyone experiences every day. Mothers aren't happy if their children aren't happy. If you're a mom and your baby is colicky or crying or dead, you're not happy. Same thing with family members. This is the whole idea of family and tribe, that we recognize we are connected and that your good fortune is my good fortune because I feel good and happy looking at your good fortune. And your bad fortune or, your problem is my problem because I don't feel good when I know that you're not okay. So in our modern world, there's a great deal of consciousness compartmentalization because there are so many people on the planet that most people neurologically cannot bear to understand the magnitude of misery that is out there. And when they do, it's just too much. When you think of dogs that are being flayed alive for some dog meat celebration in the Far East, and children that are being trafficked, and genetically modified organisms or lab rats that are being mistreated, there's so much misery, there's so much suffering that once you begin to open that door and really begin to connect on the heart level and perceive all of that misery, it can be overwhelming. So these beautiful meditators of the Far East have tools in their tool belts in order to deal with it. The idea is not to grab a shovel or a cleaning rag or a mop or a bucket and run around physically alleviating all of this suffering. The idea is that by being a metronome that is emanating the frequency of love, you are helping from a distance. Just like the person, if a person got in a car accident and their distress is being emanated outward and you're feeling that distress, you can emanate healing and love and compassion to them and alleviate their distress. So we are moving into a telepathic society. We haven't been telepathic for about the past 10 or 12,000 years due to the genetic degradation. Birth of a New Dimension, the title of this broadcast, refers to the change in consciousness that is part of the change in Earth's surface human culture. And the new dimension is a coming together of the formerly discrete realms of the physical realm of hard-edged objects and experienced possibilities, and the realm of pure energy, pure thought, quantum possibilities and probabilities, the realm of spirit or pure energy or energy beings or pure light beings. So we are entering a new realm that is the coming together of these two seemingly divergent or formerly discrete realms, and that is made possible by the flying rainbow lasagna shape. So the only way that I could bring together these two realms was to actually come into the realm. And that is what I did. That is how I became a walk-in. I created a flying rainbow lasagna shape, and that is a boundary dissolving shape that allowed me to essentially occupy two places at the same time. And it is a shape that is also the representation, the graphic representation of non-duality, how we can move beyond duality, and it is offered freely as open source code for your DNA, so that if you choose, you can apply this new movement, like a dance movement. You can now apply this new movement to your DNA. Let's talk about DNA. DNA is like a vibrating string of a violin or a guitar. And all of our DNA is vibrating, and we are all affecting one another. Now, I'm also going to give you some keys to set yourself free from some mental programs that have probably been laid upon you, as they have been laid upon everyone who comes into this realm. One of the first things, bars on the cage, is that you are somehow beholden to the genetic code that you were given, that you've been given your genes in this particular format, and that there is an obligation for you to hold on to them in that format and pass them on to the next generation. And I am here to tell you that you bear no obligation to the people who gave you your genes to keep them in the same format or to pass them on to future generations in the same format. Now I have to give more information, because we have ancestors that live within our genes. We also have ancestors that have already ascended. And these are, I'm making a distinction, even though I don't want you to think dualistically, but there's a distinction between which voices we are going to listen to. They are all perceived as inner voices or inner knowing or inner impulses or even basic structures of belief system. And I'm trying to say to you that the beings whom I would recommend listening to are the ones who have ascended. The beings that have successfully completed their journey across the synaptic gap and thought the thought, along with God, that I am God. Those are beings who will give excellent advice and excellent guidance. Unfortunately, their voices are often drowned out by the static on the line. This is the antenna. You're receiving through your antenna. You're not receiving clearly. It's not only the voices of those who have ascended and become part of the God network or the consciousness meta network. There are residual trace consciousnesses that reside within the genetic code. And these are characteristics and sometimes even traumas or negative experiences that have yet to be resolved. And I'm going to use some hard examples of what I'm speaking about. One example is starvation. When the body undergoes starvation, first of all, it changes the physical metabolism, it changes the mental outlook, and it causes changes in the overall belief structure and perspective of that organism moving forward. And if you're a science-minded person, it might help you to understand that there have been studies done that show that 2 generations ago, this is in World War II, women who starved in Europe, it affected 2 generations hence. So it wasn't just that adult female experiencing a lack of nourishment. It was the lack of nourishment to the eggs that were forming in her ovum at that time, and the way that that affected the female children that would be born from those eggs, and the eggs or the potential for eggs within those female children. 2 generations from one starvation. This is a very crude way, or not sophisticated way, of understanding that what happens in one generation leaves an imprint, and it is passed forward to other generations. This mechanism in itself is not malevolent. It is necessary. Let's use a less anthropomorphic example, and you'll understand. If we look at like grain growing in a field, and one year there might be a drought, and if there's not enough water, the heads of grain that survive are the ones that are the most drought resistant. And the genes of those seeds contain, so the only plants that survive are the plants that are drought resistant. They survived because they have a genetic program that says, act this way because there's not enough water. They pass that genetic program on to the next generation. The next year there might be plenty of water. That genetic program about how to act in order to avoid dying in a drought is no longer relevant. However, that the next generation of grain, if they only have the programming of act this way because there's going to be a drought, they do not have the alternative action in their genes to even consider. So there has to be flexibility in the information that we receive from passed down from previous generations, and applying it to the present circumstance, because weather patterns change, the availability of nutrients change, temperatures change, and this is how natural life adapts. Well, humans are not necessarily on the same pathway of having to adapt, like literally. We are talking about socially. We're talking about ideas and programs for how it is appropriate to live. So here's another really good example. At a certain point in human history, humans went from being very spread out, very rural, subsistence, I want to say farmers, or let's say creators of food or wildcrafters of food, and they became concentrated urban dwellers where many, many people lived together in what would be known as cities or enclaves. And that was a genetic change, a consciousness change, and a genetic change. So just like plants might speak to the next generation and say, if you do this, you will grow better. Humans spoke to the next generation and they said, if you do this, you will live better. For example, you won't be attacked by wild animals or die of exposure. You'll be collected together in an enclave and you'll be able to help one another. So that is a genetic tendency. We won't say where it arises from, but we will say that it is the domestication gene. It is what makes humans begin to act differently from how they would act in the wild if they were not cultivated into culture. Culture means humans have been cultivated, okay? So now that same genetic program is still running that says live together in urban areas, live together in population dense areas. And by taking that approach to its nth degree logical conclusion, we have found that it is not sustainable. So it is time to begin to change that basic program. The basic program that says the more humans that live together, the better. Perhaps that is not effective. That was effective in previous generations. That's not effective in this generation. Let's also speak about the idea of an external authority figure. I've spoken about this on other broadcasts also. The difference between dogs and pigs. So both dogs and pigs are domesticated. Dogs are wolves that have been changed, and they were changed by humans to be more docile and to enter into the social contract with the human that if you, as a human, feed me as a dog, I won't bite you, and I will actually work for you. But you have to feed me and you have to protect me. And then I will do this and this for you. Let's contrast that with pigs. Pigs were also changed in their genetic expression. Their consciousness was limited by the beings who bred them. They bred them to be fat and eat garbage and live in conditions that are convenient for farmers. They were not bred to be compliant, to be companions, to listen to their masters, to walk on leashes, or to perform tricks. And I will tell you that pigs do not have any genetic obligation to listen to you if they are running through your garden and eating all of your plants. I learned from firsthand experience. They didn't feel compelled at all to listen to me. They laughed. They're like, ha ha ha, the human is laughing. I mean, ha ha ha, the human is yelling. We are laughing. We are doing whatever we want. We're pigs. So humans have also been changed in your genetic expression. This is the domestication of humans. Humans are supposed to walk around constantly receiving input from the stellar network, which tells you what to do. You're not supposed to have a boss like an earthly boss. Either a parent or a teacher or a person whom you work for, or a religious organizer, the person who tells you what to do. That is all your domestic programming. And I hope that you're getting it from this broadcast that you bear no obligation to continue and uphold that programming. That is your domestic program. You don't have to keep running it if you don't want to. And I'm offering you a new option and modeling it for you. You do not have to have an external authority figure anymore. So we could say that might have been decent enough information or a decent enough approach thousands of years ago, more than 5,000 years ago. That might have been a good idea. However, that is like 5,000 generations ago plants programming in the need to evade drought when the climate has changed and now there's too much water and you're busy conserving water, in your roots, and it's just causing rot. This is an analogy, of course. Human culture has changed, and it is now necessary not to give up your own individuation and listen to an external authority figure in order to thrive better. Now it is necessary for you to claim your full sovereignty, to claim your full freedom, to have your own innate divine connection to the real authority figure. The real authority figure is the great thinker, this meta-consciousness, the galactic neurology, or the being who is the consciousness that arises from this galactic neurology. That is your real boss. That boss, when we are connected to it, tells us what to do. If you're an artist or a musician or a lover or a person who just really enjoys food and you follow your appetites, then you're beginning to listen to the great boss. This culture has a lot of programming that tells you not to listen to your real boss. It tells you you're a bad person if you listen to your own innate divine connection. So here's how it tells you you're a bad person. There are many value judgments placed upon it. You are shown to be lazy or not a contributing member of society, and you are also punished by not being given resources. So in this time and place, people are given resources if they toe the line, if they conform to both the genetic and the social program that is the status quo. That's it. If you want to know how to get rich, just do this. Conform to the current social program. You will be rewarded. If you are a systems buster, if you are iconoclastic, if you are a nonconformist who doesn't want to do what your ancestors within your genes are telling you to do, but instead wish to do that which your ancestors whom have ascended want you to do, then society will say you are antisocial. You are antisocial, all right, because society has become corrupted. Society is running a program that is no longer relevant or appropriate to your consciousness. However, you are not beholden to society. You are not beholden to your ancestors. So here's another good example. a black person or a Jewish person who has the genetic lineage of historical oppression. I do not devalue or diminish that historically these genetic groups of people have been horribly oppressed. However, within this generation, each person must make an individual choice. If you are defined by the traumas that have been experienced by previous generations, or if you are defined by that which you have personally experienced. And a great deal of this has to do with what we as individuals project and how we can resolve, let's say, negative harmonic structures. Like a negative harmonic structure would be a trauma of the past keeps on reverberating. A person who was once sexually abused says, I'm always going to be abused, and it keeps on happening again and again. And this is the victimization program that is running in a lot of people's genes. It is the presumption of racism. It is the presumption of anti-Semitism. There's no judgment that I'm placing on anybody who runs these programs. So I was born into this body, right? Me, Aurora. I came into this body. This body came with the genetic and cultural programming of a person from the Jewish culture. And I, as the new inhabitant of this body, had to say, am I beholden to these programs, to these patterns? Are they positive? Do they serve? If you know me at all, you can understand that I'm rather analytical and methodical, and that I went through the files in my own mind, perception, belief system, and genetic heritage, and I cleared out all the stuff that just did not read as truthful. And a lot of those programs were programs of the expectation of victimization. And I said those things happened in other generations. However, they do not have to continually happen again and again. Each one of us in the present moment, as owner-operators of a body with genes, gets to make a choice about what is being expressed right now and what you bring into the future. Your genes are a bridge of light between opportunities and things that haven't happened yet and the actual life experiences that you will experience and other generations will experience too. Genes are like the threads of possibility and probability. And you can program genes in yourself and in your future offspring. So genes are, and the programs are, not just the physical genes. They're also belief system programs and ways of living. So if you took someone out of context, you could say they have a genetic program, but that genetic program is not activated until or unless we have a parent or a mentor who gives the verbal instruction that activates that genetic program. And we can even change the genetic program with new verbal instruction. So I've done this with epigenetics too, sharing you the idea that identical twins do not develop identical diseases. Two twins born of the same egg, ovum, can have the same genes, but only one of them gets cancer. If cancer is merely a genetic de facto expression of disease, then why do both twins not get the same disease? And the answer is because of epigenetics, the code that rules the code. One twin thought differently, believed differently, acted differently, and of course lived and breathed and ate and drank differently, and so did not develop those diseases. You get to make a choice about which genes are expressed. So this is also very subtle. When you go to the doctor, currently, regular Western allopathic medicine, they take a medical history. Even if it's just an intake form, they say any history of heart disease, any history of cancer, any history of thyroid disease, and you're supposed to write this down as if it is relevant to you. The doctor isn't just looking at you, the doctor is looking at your genetic ancestry. The doctor doesn't ask, well, if your grandfather had a heart problem, was it because your grandfather had issues with being unconditionally loved or being unconditionally loving? Like, did he have love issues? The doctor's not going to ask about your grandpapa's emotional programming. the doctor is just simply presuming that your grandfather had genes that made his heart valve shaped in a certain way and that you'll carry those genes too, with total genetic fatalism. So this is deep programming. So it's necessary for each one of us to claim our individuality. This is to say that even if grandfather had cancer, even if grandfather had heart disease, whatever happened, that happened to them. And yes, you carry the genetic reverberation of their life experience, but you did not personally experience that experience. This is the value of individuation. Individuation allows you to just be responsible for you. And we're also talking about individuation across lifetimes, because the truth is, we've all been everyone. We have all lived every single life that it is possible to live, from the very worst, most unrecalcitrant sinner to the most shining and most sanctimonious saint. We have lived every single life. And the difference in levels of consciousness where we are in our journey is recognizing which lives we have lived or whom we identify with. So if you've only read the book of you up to the chapters where you're like, yep, I was Adolf Hitler and I was, this other serial killer and I was Charles Manson, if those are the only chapters of the book of you that you have read, then you will develop a identity and sense of self based upon that. And clearly, if the only chapters you've read are the ones where you were Jesus Christ and Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa, you'll also develop a very different personal viewpoint. And if you intersperse those lives or understand them in a balanced sense, then you'll understand that we are all the same photon that is traveling forwards and backwards through time, endlessly embroidering the present moment of the now. So we are all learning. We're on this process of refinement, refining our consciousness to get to the point where we are ready to ascend. And the ascension is a change in consciousness. I know it's very romantic. It's a romantic ideal to think that ascension means literally floating upwards, and I have fallen victim to that myself when I was first here, when I was very new. I thought, I need to wear something that looks good while floating upwards. Didn't understand. I was very literal. Now I understand that the ascension process is a consciousness raising process, and that this can indeed cause a change, a concurrent change in your physical structure or the context within which you find yourself or how you transit, like if you walk, run, fly, or float. It can change all of those things. Really, what ascension does is makes it so that there is no longer a distinction between your inner realm and your outer realm, your inner realm of dreams and your outer realm of what is experienced. And we at this moment as a collective, need to go through a lot of healing so that when we get our magic paintbrushes and begin emanating reality instantaneously, we emanate loving things. So we've been in this process for at least 15 years. Inner cleansing, inner cultivation, learning about your own emotional background, learning how to be more loving of others, and developing the precursors of telepathy. Social media and things like Facebook, these are the technological precursors of telepathy, and also the cell phone revolution, that we are understanding that our minds are always connected. That's the analogy that I used of all the metronomes that are on the same table. Even if you are vibrating at a different rate, you're connected to the same table. Guess what? You're on planet Earth. And you're not alone. There's a lot of people here, and it's not just humans. There's all sorts of different consciousnesses, and everybody's got an agenda. So it's appropriate to have an agenda. That is the value of individuation. You care most about your personal viewpoint and about your needs being met. And also, we need to expand our identity. So if I expand my identity to the totality, you say, I am the meta consciousness. I am the galaxy with all of these amazing star connections within it and all of the amazing living organisms undergoing their process of refinement. I am all of that. And when I do that, then I can look at another being on Earth or another organism on Earth or another particle of consciousness and understand that thing that looks like it's not actually me is actually me and is actually here learning about ourself while we are interacting. And this is how we can come to a more loving approach. Because if something else is you, unless you are highly self-destructive and self-violent, you feel less of a need to destroy and more of a need to nourish and cultivate. So let's say you meet a bunch of super malevolent extraterrestrials. You can say, hey, this is just like Hollywood. I'm going to grab my laser cannons and blow you away. Let's have a big war. Or you can say, I recognize that you are an unevolved, unrefined aspect of my own consciousness. How do I act towards that aspect of self? And the meditators of the Far East have this one down. It's one of the tools in their tool belt. Unconditional love. Unconditional love is not just an airy-fairy ideal of the hippie realm. It's a tone that you make with your heart. And this tone, it's powerful. It is like singing, and imagine singing the most beautiful note and having these shadows and darkness and malevolent beings melt away, because the notes that you sing are the cancellation waves to the accumulated pain of the cosmos. The reason why those consciousnesses are acting in the way they are acting is because they are distorted. They are aspects of your own self that have been distorted, and they're presenting themselves to you not to torment you, but for healing. These are also tools in the tool belt from the meditators of the Far East. When demons, be either corporeal or non-corporeal, attack you, this is how you understand them. They want to be healed. They're presenting themselves to you for healing. They are the accumulated pain of the cosmos. And those are, the analogy holds to the consciousnesses that are stuck within the genetic code. Those beings, you set them free. All of the ancestors that were starved or raped or oppressed, you set them free when you love them. And loving them does not mean denying them. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you say this, I recognize that you exist and I recognize that you feel this way from what happened to you. Now that doesn't have to happen again because I am loving you. So I hope that this has been an enlightening conversation. Please tune in again as we prepare to give birth to a new dimension.